radio waves into audio waves. And there were a thing called a carborundum detector, and sulfuric acid detectors, and many other various forms, when finally the thing that became most used in the mid 1900s, around 1915 and up till 1920, and even up as far as 1925, was a crystal, and a crystal detector. Now this is a commercially built crystal set, and in here is a little glob of lead ore, which we used to call galena. And this little piece of galena could be purchased at the local dime store for between 15 cents and maybe 25 cents if you wanted to get a real big piece of galena. And you would wind a coil and tune the coil to the frequency of a broadcast station that was near you, and using headphones and a long wire antenna. Usually you had to have 100 feet of wire outside, and this would be connected to a water pipe ground. And then you would sit down on a quiet evening and turn this tap, which would turn in more or less number of turns of wire. And then you would start to fiddle around with this little wire, which was called a cat whisker, and find a place on the galena crystal where you could hear audio. Now, we have a very simple device today, which is known as a diode. That's exactly what this crystal detector was. It was a diode. And if you were to replace this crystal detector with one of today's modern diodes, it would pick up a radio signal, and you wouldn't have to look around for a place with a crystal. So that's and the modern receivers have lots of diodes in them, as well as transistors, of course. Now, the early experimenters didn't have too much to listen to, so they tried to transmit, and this is an early transmitter. This was built in about 1915, that era. This is a coil, and it made a spark across here, and you hooked an antenna onto it like you did the other, and then there was a transfer switch here. You would transmit with this switch in the one position and throw the switch over to receive in the other. And this part over here is the receiver. It consists of a coil of wire with two sliders on it. This is a fixed condenser, and then here again is the crystal detector. Now this little buzzer was used to set up sort of a signal that you could use to locate a good spot on the crystal. It was sort of an early signal generator, you might say. So with a device like this, you could in real good luck, you could talk about 5 miles. And my cousin and I used to have a transmitter set up, but we used a Ford coil. This was a coil out of this says Ford right on here, if you can get into it. This was out of a Model T Ford. The Model T Ford, for you car buffs, know that the Ford had 4 of these coils, and they were used to operate the spark plugs, and it made a spark. Now I can put a battery on this and make a small spark here. If you can get real close on this, right at this point here, we should be able to make a spark. You can see that little spark there. Now, when they used the transmitter on shipboard, they used much more powerful devices. They used rotary spark gaps, which would put out 1,000 watts and even 5,000 or 10,000 watts. Then they created a fluid arc with alcohol in a chamber, and that arc kept going all the time. And they later tried to modulate that by putting a microphone in series with the ground lead of a transmitter, and the first voice transmissions were done by modulating an arc transmitter.